Hello, hello, and welcome to the Bold and Bodacious Sisterhood video series. I am so excited to be with you today. I'm Gabrielle Garofalo, in case this is the first time you are being introduced to me. And this is the incredible Althea Branton that I am so excited to feature today. We are going to dig into lots of conversations, pretty organic. I'm not going to necessarily go through all of the questions that I've developed in other versions of these video series, but I'm going to talk to Althea about her incredible podcast called Broken Hearted. And I'm just going to dig in and ask you to tell me a little bit about like your history, right? Like who you are, where you're from, where you live, what your life is a little bit about, and how you came to step into what I think is just, it's so much a part of me as being a coach, which is stepping into the full human experience, number one. And also as a Black woman, because I want to be able to step forward into these conversations, right, from my white privilege and ask you, because you said something very profound on your 2.0 Broken Hearted podcast, which was that you are reclaiming your body, mind, heart, and soul, that it's up to you to free yourself. And so as someone who's committed to helping women step into their truest self, talk to me about that, because there's no question for anybody with a functioning, brain in their head that Black women have it way harder than white women. And then later we're going to dive into a little bit of the conversation you had with Katie, which is just about, where women fall in general in like the worthiness spectrum. And anyway, so you get sort of where I'm going, but let's
Yes.
dive in.
All right. So to answer the first part of the question of where I'm from, I'm in Canada. I live literally across the lake from Toronto. So if I were to go to Lake Ontario, I could actually see it. Born, raised in Canada. I am first generation Canadian. My family is from Antigua, which is a little teeny island in the Caribbean. So growing up you had the Canadian culture and then you had the Antiguan culture. So there was always this kind of clash between the two. You want to be Canadian. I mean, who doesn't? But there's always
I
this
can tell you
notion.
it's looking really good from America right now. By the way, feels like a good time to put my shirt
Voting for the
full
future.
frame.
Well,
Yeah,
I could
man.
say, and this is an absolute fact, that the night of your most recent election, the immigration website, the Canadian immigration website, actually crashed because there was so many people trying to log on to find out how they could move to Canada. I'm just saying. That doesn't mean that Canada isn't without its history. I mean, the way we have treated our Indigenous peoples is just disgusting. There is numerous amounts of systemic racism here in Canada. It's just very well hidden and very subtle, and we can get into that a bit later. So a little bit about me. Born and raised in Canada. I'm actually a certified strategic intervention life coach, but I gave up my coaching practice. And I gave up my coaching practice because it's not up to me to make these changes and make these transformations. I really genuinely wanted to help people through heartbreak and help them navigate it, because heartbreak is something that people don't really talk about and people don't think it's a thing. I would go to networking events and people would say, "What do you do?" And I'd say, "I help people navigate heartbreak." And they would look at me like I just said, "I go to the moon and harvest cheese so you can eat it." It's just, they don't have any comprehension of it, because heartbreak is not something that you would need help with.
Because we're shamed into thinking that if you have it, you are broken.
Yes, there's something wrong with you.
And I'm really obsessed with Brene Brown on this subject, and I'd love to hear about any Black women, seriously, like authors, researchers who talk about shame, because I think shame is so poisonous, and I see it in my own parenting, like with stupid stuff with my kids, right? Like my daughter painted her nails this morning, and I'm like, you should have known that you should have gotten your chores done first, and but it's like, there's probably gentler ways, right? She just woke up as a 13-year-old, wanted to paint her nails, right? Like now I'm shaming her about just having a great sort of summer morning, right? So it's funny because there's shame in our stories. So I find that
Yes.
fascinating.
Yes.
Sorry
It's
to interrupt, but yeah.
no, not at all. I mean, is it the question as parents, and I'm a mom too, and the question we ask
Yeah.
ourselves is, where is this actually coming from? Is it me? Is it my own views on, is she painting her nails? Like, what does that mean? Is it the color? Is it, there's so many connotations as to,
Yeah.
maybe she just wants to paint her nails before she gets her day started.
Yeah, exactly. Or to like your point, like being in a work environment, right, where you're there arguably to support one another at a networking event, and people look at you like, you what?
Yeah.
People, oh, those poor weak people who suffer heartbreak. Right? So talk more about, so you
So
decided to step aside from your coaching practice.
yes, because the online coaching space and the online personal development space, it's more about the coach and how much money the coach can make. And it's more marketing, like, you have a problem and I have a solution. So for example, Gabrielle, you have a headache. So as a coach, I'm supposed to market, you have a headache? I have the Tylenol. I'm just using Tylenol as a brand and not like disclaimer. Yeah, I have the painkiller that's going to help you. And I'm the only one that has the painkiller. And I'm the authority on this painkiller. And I know all there is to know about this painkiller. Whereas I would approach it as, okay, you got a headache? How long have you had the headache? Have you had headaches before?
Yeah.
What have you tried to get rid of your headache? Is there something underlying that we don't know about that's causing your headache? Now, there is a drugstore down the street. I'm going to point you in the direction of that drugstore, but it's really up to you to get rid of your own headache. And for some reason, it's not, people aren't picking up on that. People want the painkiller to the headache. People want a pill to get over heartbreak. That's just not how I roll.
Yeah, and I think, but that what's so interesting and why I'm so committed to coaching, right, on the opposite end of that spectrum. But I love how you're choosing. I'm gonna just, respectfully challenge you that you are still coaching. Your format is different. Now you're expressing yourself, right, you're actually giving yourself more reach in a way in your podcast. But I also love, like, you're coaching through the lens of what you think the world needs, not necessarily what someone thinks they need. And to your point, and what I was going to say originally is, like, why I love the coaching space so much is because I know for sure that people who coach with me, it's going to take work, people. And it's going to take, and going to take you getting out of your own damn way too, by the way. And so, I had someone actually say to me, because I was posting something very anti the current president of the United States, not anti, but just more like, everybody wake the F up, please. Because if you support him and you're okay with him trying to dismantle our post office in the middle of an election, and he's discouraging mailing in your ballots, like, I don't understand how you're not concerned about your own freedom, whether that's your bank account. Like, I don't know what speaks to the people who support him or why, but I do want to understand. I'm not one of these people who's going to, like, block people who support him. I really want to try and understand the thought. But anyway, someone said to me, careful about my comments about the president. And I wrote back, careful, that's really funny. And this person said, I'm not going to unfollow you, but we share very, very differing opinions about, the president. And I wrote, you came into my space and then you're going to tell me to be careful. That does not work for me. I have no problem that we have a difference of opinion, but don't come into my house and tell me how to act. And I feel like that's, in a way, how you're taking your coaching, right? Like, clients ain't going to tell me what they want me to do to fix their life. I'm going to do a podcast and let people fix their own lives and discover heartbreak and healing through the voice you want to have. Like, back to the point, right? Like, you're going to reclaim your body, mind, heart, and soul.
So in that vein, I started this podcast for a couple of reasons. One, I wanted to navigate my own heartbreak. This was a heartbreak that I had never, it was in such a level and such a profondeur, which is French for depth. I am bilingual. Canada is a bilingual country. I am bilingual.
Mm.
I wanted to navigate it and I needed to explore it. I needed to just dive into it and say, what in the name of everything green and holy has just happened? So I
And do you want to
embarked.
explain that heartbreak? Like, do you want to give people a little sense of the kind of heartbreak you're referring to? Because we've discussed prior, obviously, to recording this, like, that people think of heartbreak only as romantic, but like heartbreak can
Mm-hmm.
happen in career loss. You talked about that in
Yes.
one of your episodes
Yes.
about not getting a job. So anyway, do you want to speak,
Yes.
just
Yes,
give a little
absolutely.
preview? Yeah, that would be
Yes,
great. Thanks.
absolutely. It's funny because this is a story that if you had asked me to share the story 6 months ago, I would have said no. But
Yeah.
now I have come to a point where I can openly and publicly talk about this to the planet. So I had thought I had found my twin flame.
Mm.
However, my twin flame has found their twin flame and is now with their twin flame and possibly other flames that I may or may not know about.
Okay.
So going through that phase where you meet someone and you're just you've come in contact with someone who touches you on a soul level. And then all of a sudden, for a various number of reasons, that just disappears. That
Mm.
opportunity is just gone. So this podcast was a way for me to explore this. I wanted to know if there were other people on the planet. And this was initially, Broken Hearted was supposed to be just about romantic breakups. It was going to be people sharing their stories. There's not a whole lot of great breakup advice out there. It's kind of in the reign of just get over it straight up. Just don't even acknowledge your feelings or emotions. Um, Eat ice cream, watch copious amounts of streaming videos, get wasted, sleep with someone else. And I have categorically made it clear that you will not find self-help in between anybody else's legs. It's just not going to happen.
Oh,
And
wait. Let the people take that in.
yes, if you go on my Instagram feed, you will actually see a post that says, you will not find self-help between someone else's legs. It has to
Between
do,
yours, yeah.
it has to do with you. I needed a way to deal with my emotions. I needed a way to explore what I was feeling and also to
Yeah.
really find out, is the rest of the world, have anyone else experienced what I've just experienced? And if they have, what is that like? So in that exploration, I discovered that heartbreak isn't just about a romantic or intimate relationship coming to an end.
Yeah.
There are so many different ways our hearts can be broken. I lost my brother almost 2 years ago.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Thank you. To me, that is also a form of heartbreak.
Oh my God,
When
yeah.
you lose a job, you see, especially now these days with the global pandemic, that kind of life that we find ourselves in, you hear on the news every day of
Oh,
this chain has gone bankrupt. So when
horrible.
all these places are going bankrupt, these are thousands of people that are losing their jobs and their livelihoods. How do you
Yep.
deal with that chapter coming to an end? How do you deal when a friendship
Yeah.
comes to an end?
And I think it's so interesting too, because loss, heartbreak, right? Loss is, again, like, we are not, I was thinking about this today because I also am a huge fan of Glennon Doyle's. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I can even tell, like, so I have a child that's turning 16 on Friday, and our other child turns 13 right at the beginning of the pandemic when everything was getting canceled. This was before even birthday parades were happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I can feel still like it's like this want to make it up to her. And the truth
Mm-hmm.
is, like, there's a global pandemic. Like, disappointment is part of life. And I
Mm-hmm.
think we're trained to, as parents, and I love that Glennon Doyle sort of reminded me of this. It's like
Mm-hmm.
resilience happens in the hard stuff. We
Mm-hmm.
learn our strength and our growth through the heartbreak and through the
Mm-hmm.
loss. But the only way you're going to do it is if you feel it. And I
Mm-hmm.
love that you have so boldly stepped into that, especially, at this time, and are so
Mm-hmm.
committed to the conversation of heartbreak in a way that, normalizes it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think it's so important. You know, my clients are like, oh, I do all my feeling in therapy. Like, I don't want to feel and like, I want to just do in the coaching. And I was like,
Mm.
careful, because no matter where you go, there you are. And the surest way to hold on to a feeling is to try and avoid feeling it.
Mm-hmm.
So, the idea of heartbreak, I just think is like, there's so much courage in that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think, what do you think is the most important element for people to face when it comes to heartbreak?
Themselves, the entirety of themselves, because what happens when your heart gets broken, there's this immediate rush of emotion. And when I talk about emotion, I'm not talking about what's positive or what's negative. I mean, I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah,
strictly talking the full range of human emotion. There's a whole host of emotions that come up. There could be sadness, anger, resentment, frustration, grief, joy. There, you might be remembering in the moment the good times that you had in that situation. So there's all these emotions that come up. Some of them aren't great. Let's be real for a second. Who wants to feel pain? It sucks. It's
right,
horrible. Who wants
right.
to feel grief? Nobody wants to feel these things. So all these emotions come up, and it's like there's probably more bad ones than good ones. So it's like, ooh, I don't want to feel this. So just let's mute everything.
Yeah. And you know what's so fascinating, actually, and I just learned this, that like the human body only feels, like, if you allow yourself to feel the actual emotion, it only stays with your body for like 90 seconds or something. It's like less than 2 minutes. So when you allow yourself to feel, the feeling literally moves through you in that amount of time. So imagine how less pent up the world would be if everybody took a freaking, 120 seconds a couple times a day to feel their feelings instead of shove it down,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I work with women on all sorts of issues, right, around food, and we're taught to just cram it down,
Yeah.
like as
We're
if it's
taught
going
to
to go
suppress
away.
it. We
Yeah,
can't express it,
right,
but there's socially acceptable ways to express what you're feeling.
right.
So we'll
That we're
take my
supposed
brother's
to
passing
subscribe
for
to.
exactly. We'll take my brother's passing as an example. So when I learned of his passing, I was in shock. And then I went through a few days of, I just remembered him as a teenager, and it made me laugh.
Yeah.
It made me laugh. And people thought I was losing my loving mind because I would talk about my brother and I would laugh. I did go through the crying phase, but the truth is that grief is supposed to, in the society at large, grief is supposed to look like boohooing, boohooing, boohooing for a certain prescribed amount of time, after which you're expected to stop. The reality is grief stays with you. Grief has many
Mm.
faces. There is no beginning and no end to grief. Grief simply evolves.
That's beautiful.
So
That's
over
beautiful.
time, when I go to visit my brother's grave, I still shed a tear, but I also
Yeah.
still laugh. I
Yeah.
also reflect. I have had periods of numbness where I
Yeah.
didn't feel anything,
Yep.
but that's just the cycle of what feelings come up when it comes to grief. You see grief portrayed in movies and TV. It's just usually like somebody flailing themselves in the casket, or just
Right.
like, everybody very calm and very somber, and like there's no room for joy.
Hmm.
There's only, when you ever seen the movie Waiting to Exhale?
Yes.
Remember that scene where Angela Bassett's character, she throws a cigarette in the car goes up in flames? Yes, that is an acceptable way to process the end of a relationship.
Right.
It's always, when you see breakups in movies and television and online, it's
Uh-oh.
never,
You froze for a sec. Okay, you're
oh,
back.
we're good. It's never just somebody just kind of sitting and processing like, okay, this has happened. It's always a certain way, and it's always a certain amount of time, and always has to be, it's to fit in this box.
Yeah.
Brokenhearted says, my podcast is like, okay, no. All of that, we're throwing it out the window. Because the reality of the situation is, we are human beings, and it is not socially acceptable for us to experience a full range of human emotion.
Right.
So we're going to talk about it. We're going to go there.
Yeah.
And when I say I'm going to reclaim my heart, mind, body, and soul, as of late, people are now, that's a whole other conversation itself, I think. People are now starting to realize systemic racism is a problem and has been a problem forever. This isn't anything new. This is not a trending hashtag.
I'm so glad you just transitioned there because of your 2.0. I want to talk about, because two things happened when I heard it. One was I was like, I want to be on the podcast, right? And then I was like, all right, wait a second. This may not be the episodes, like the series that I get featured in, but how do you want to shine a light, right, through the lens of being brokenhearted and systematic racism and colonialism and the things that I know you really want to shed light on? Because, and I don't know if I can, remind me if I said this to you, but I think I've coined a new phrase for women like me who thought I was so educated and so woke. So I call it faux woke, right? Like FAUX. I was faux woke.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it was about and maybe it's because we're all dealing with a global pandemic, and then the George Floyd thing was the straw on the camel's back.
Yeah.
But, you know, hundreds of years in America.
Yeah.
And forgive me for not knowing, you know, how long in Canada and the rest of the world, right? Like there's been this oppressive, take other human beings hostage, force them into slavery and parenthood and work without pay and building our society without credit and all of these things, right? And I was like, holy shit. Like, if I feel like, you know, and I love that we're supposed to, you know, like not supposed to, but like this sucker punch in the gut, sort of like, I stop breathing for a couple minutes, right? Every time I sort of face myself with this faux woke idea of how, you know, legit I thought I was in my own anti-racism. And I'm like flabbergasted at all of the things I never even had to think about because of my white privilege. So, and it was funny because again, like you even noticed, I was like, well, I want to be featured on the podcast. And it's like, how many times does a white person just think that and just get it versus how many times a black person thinks that and then has to fight and fight and fight and fight and sometimes never get it.
It's funny you mention the first season of Brokenhearted. I have featured people from 15 different countries on my podcast.
Amazing.
So it was a really wake up call for me to know that in every corner of the planet, on every continent, there's someone out there dealing with heartbreak and not knowing what in the name of heaven to do or even how to begin.
Yeah.
So having these conversations like the one that you and I have now is a step in I don't want to say right direction, but it's a step in a different direction.
Yeah.
It's a step in a different direction than the direction that we're currently on.
Yeah.
Whereas these systems, they don't just affect North America. Canada in itself, Canada was a British colony up until 1867. We are technically a dominion. Our head of state is Queen Elizabeth II. So there's still elements of colonialism that still exist in Canada. We can't make our own laws unless we have royal assent. So this is a global situation. This is this phenomenon of one group of people going somewhere else and saying, hey, you got some stuff I want. I'm just going to go in and help myself. Y'all are going to help me because I'm not doing this work because I'm better than you.
Right.
This is a global phenomenon. This is not just reserved for North America. This has happened all over the world. These systems of one group of people being dominant over another is a global phenomenon. So when I say I'm reclaiming myself, I'm saying I recognize that these systems exist. I recognize that there is a belief out there that as a Black woman, I am somehow less intelligent. I'm forever angry. I'm all these different things, just this hot ball of, oh, and I'm supposedly very articulate. In fact, my twin flame, or the person formerly known as my twin flame, actually told me I was articulate. And so, for the record, I hold an honors Bachelor of Science and Language, otherwise known as a degree in translation. I have a minor in simultaneous interpretation.
Wow.
With major degrees of study in English and French linguistics. I'm also fully bilingual. So yes, I'm going to own this microaggression and let the world know I am articulate.
Yeah, of course.
I know words. I also dig words too. They're kind of fun.
Yeah.
On another note, these systems that tell the world that I am less than because of my parentage, because of the color of my skin, I am less than. My voice, I made this podcast to amplify my own voice, to create my own platform, because I was sick of waiting for other people to give me permission to do this.
Okay, I love that. Because I'm going to take us into one of my questions that I thank you, which is, why, because you just sort of said it, right? Like, I'm going to lead by example. So why is it so important for you to inspire other Black, Indigenous, and women of color? Like, what are you hoping for your podcast? Like numbers wise, global domination wise, like, what self-expression, right? Like, you don't even have to, it doesn't even have to be about any level of achievement beyond the doing of it. But what do you also want other women who have been oppressed and are living within cultures of systematic racism or worse, depending on where in the world they are, what do you want them to know?
This season is about having that discussion. It's really about saying, if you have been oppressed, suppressed, and repressed your entire life, and you run into these situations in your interpersonal relationships, where if you're like me, the world tells you, you're less than, and you get that at home as well, because it was reinforced as a kid that I was always going to be less than. I wasn't smart, I wasn't this, I wasn't that. It was just never going to happen for me. So of course, when I face the world in interpersonal relationships, it's like, what do I do? I have no frame of reference for how to experience an emotion.
Yeah.
Experiencing emotion in my home was met with swift consequence. You just didn't do it.
Yeah.
So I want women of color, women identifying people of color, to understand that the most radical act you can do is not pick up a sign and go in the streets. It's to reclaim your own self, to get in touch with your emotions. Our emotions have been systematically suppressed, repressed, and oppressed for hundreds of years. To tap into your desires, to wake up and to know yourself. Where does your influence come from?
Yeah.
Where do your beliefs come from? Who is telling you these things? Where does all this start? That is a radical act. To know oneself, to connect to oneself, because over time, there are these systems in place that want to disconnect us from our own selves and keep us disconnected from our own selves.
And I think that is true of Black, Indigenous, and women of color, but that's also true of women in general. Like, I think we're pitted against each other.
Yes, we are.
One of the reasons that I wanted to create this Bold and Bodacious Sisterhood series is because, of my own faux wokeness, right? To like really be doing the work that shines a light where it needs to be shown, and also to educate the world on how much creativity and beauty and power there is in the world when women stand side by side and share these conversations and experiences and put our gifts into the world. And I think, it's great that we met through Hello Seven, because the great
Mhm.
Rachel Rogers, who just bought this a badass ranch, you should check out her Instagram
I
post.
saw that this morning.
Unbelievable, right?
Wow.
Is like so inspirational that, you know, she said the most radical act you can do is become a millionaire, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
She's
as
absolutely right.
women. And I think like there's so much power in showing up for yourself, to your point. And I think as coaches, inherently, that's what we want for people in the world,
Mm-hmm.
because we finally learned how to show up for our damn selves.
Mm-hmm.
I love
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do for pure pleasure? Like to just recharge your batteries and, you know, have some fun. What's your idea of like pure
These
pleasure?
days, it's going outside, walking
Yeah.
near the lake. I love being near the water. I find it
Yes.
peaceful. And I take it full advantage because the snow is coming.
Yeah. No kidding.
Winter is coming. I'm not a Game of Thrones fan, but I love that phrase, winter is coming, because it literally is. So it'll be 6 months of staying inside in the heat and artificial air, which is just icky.
Right.
So going outside and taking advantage. I love to read. Love.
Yeah, especially as a mom, to even have the quiet to be able to do that.
Those moments are few and far between.
Yeah, still a gift.
Definitely few and far between.
As we actually, so on the subject, and as we get to the last question of this conversation for now, what legacy do you want to leave your child, you know, your child, the next generation of women? What legacy do you want to leave for your ancestors, right?
I think for my son, it's a body of work to show that Mummy was someone that expressed herself. Mummy had a dream and she made it come to life. For the generations to follow, that radical act of reclaiming yourself, heart, mind, body, and soul, feeling emotions, tapping into desires, expressing creativity. Women, for however long that men decided that women should not be leaders, warriors, sages, people of authority.
Right.
In indigenous cultures, women were the dominant force. Women brought forth life. Now, there's nothing really that men can do about that, unless there's some kind of science that I just don't know about just yet.
Right.
But the fact that we women have the abilities, if we so choose, and that's another conversation in itself, if we so choose to bring forth life, we carry human life in our bodies for 9 months. And if you stop for a minute and think about what has to happen inside our body to sustain another human being and bring that human being into the world, it's stuff of superheroes, but it's also super freaky and super daunting and can really freak people out. So as I want future generations to know, these systems that were put in place were put in place for one reason and one reason only, and that reason is fear. Being afraid of being less than, being afraid of not seen as more advanced, more dominant, whatever. Fear. This fear has been passed down by ignorance, by whatever, these beliefs that Black people are lazy, Asians are super smart, Jewish people have lots of money. These beliefs that we know to be untrue have been passed down from generation to generation, which is why there are people, you know, when I see 20-year-olds talking online about these racist things, I'm thinking, no, somebody taught you that.
Right.
Someone taught you that these beliefs are true.
Right. Yeah. And if we go back to what we know for sure about the human mind, is that thoughts can be changed, right? Mm-hmm. It's possible to change hearts and minds.
It is.
Well, I want to thank you for having courageous conversations, for creating Broken Hearted, so that the rest of us can step into our more human vulnerabilities and strengths and wisdom. And thank you for being a stand in your own greatness and for shedding a light on systematic racism and helping educate all of us who need to know more, the opportunity to check our faux wokeness um, and learn a little more of the goodness that we need to, right, to help
Mm-hmm.
change the world. Because
Mm-hmm.
I think for sure it's going to be up to women to change the world. So let's get to
Yes, it
it,
is.
people, right?
Let's crack on. Let's do this.
Thank you so much, Althea, for your time. It is a blessing to know you. I will look forward to checking out more episodes coming soon.
Yep. Season
All right,
2
so tell,
starts. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, no, tell, I was just going to say, tell people where to find you, when the season starts, and
All
all of those
right.
good things so they can follow you on social and your website and all that.
Absolutely. Season 2 drops September 21st, 2020. So if you are in a binge-worthy mood, you can go to anchor.fm/brokenhearted and you can binge the entirety of season 1. And it is a roller coaster. I go from friendships ending to secondary infertility. I share my story of miscarriage. I share Pride Means Life is a special one to me. I share coming really close to ending my own life. It's a story that I've never, ever, ever shared publicly before. There was probably 3 people on the planet who knew that story. So check that out. I also have a new website for the show, www.brokenhearted.xyz. You can also follow Brokenhearted on Instagram at brokenhearted.podcast.
Thank you, my beautiful sister. I really appreciate your time, your courage, and for staying on the planet so you can share your gifts with us.
Thank you. It's been a
Thank
joy.
you. Have a great day.